Notre Dame fans, welcome back to edition 2 of the Irish Breakdown game prediction podcast video for Notre Dame against Boston College. The 7-0 Irish travel to Chestnut Hill this weekend to take on the 5-3 Boston College Eagles. And for Notre Dame fans, hopefully this is an opportunity for them to get a little bit of the older fans like you and I, a little bit of that Boston College 1993 sting out of things a little bit. So right now what Vince D'Addario, our football analyst, Irish Breakdown, and I are going to do is we are going to give our predictions for the Notre Dame Boston College game. We're going to talk about how we think the game is going to get played out. We're going to give our score prediction. Then we're going to kind of do a different kind of prediction. We're going to predict who our game balls are going to go to once the game is played. So it's going to make it a little bit more interesting. So Vince, when you look at this matchup, we've watched the film, you've looked at the stats, you see these two teams. How do you see this game playing out? How do you think Notre Dame and BC is going to go? I know we talked a little bit about this on our podcast. You were back and forth like me on it. You know, I could see a scenario in which the game is competitive. I could see a scenario in which the game is not close. At the end of the day, it's prediction time. How do you see this game playing out?
Well, when Notre Dame's defense is on the field, I feel confident when Notre Dame's defense is on the field. I feel confident in Clark Lee. One of the things that he's really good at is taking away what you're best at, and Boston College is one-dimensional. I mean, they just are. They don't. This isn't the Boston College of the last 10 years where they're going to run the ball. A.J. Dillon isn't walking through that door. You know what I mean? Like so. They don't have the back. Now, Bailey is a decent back. He had over 800 yards last year, but the focus was on the run game. They didn't have a quarterback. They haven't had a quarterback probably since Matt Ryan, to be honest with you, that you can count on. Well, they have one now. They've got Phil Jurkovec. He's a good quarterback. You mentioned it in your Phil Jurkovec breakdown. He's responsible for 74% of the offense, man. That number is gigantic. It's gigantic. And I think you said – Ian Book is responsible for 50-some-odd percent.
It's like 57% of the yards. And then 40.6%, Ian Book is responsible for 40.6% of the touchdowns, which means passing and rushing.
And we're not comparing the two.
78%. It's just context. It gives context.
That's right.
How dependent BC is on Phil Jurkovec to carry.
Right, because those other yards and touchdowns for Notre Dame come from the run game. And those aren't coming from Boston College. It's Phil Jurkovec or bust, basically. And I do – look, I think Phil's going to make some plays. He always does. He's the third-rated quarterback on Pro Football Focus outside the pocket. They need to keep him in the pocket. He can still hurt you in there, but he's not going to hurt you as much as when he's scrambling around and using his legs, et cetera. So I think he'll make a play or two. That's why I gave them 17 points, because I think there might be a play over the top. He's shown that he can check down. He can take what the defense is giving him. He did that a lot against Syracuse. But he's also got the prettiest long ball, man, that I've seen in person in a really, really long time, maybe ever, because my experience doesn't go back quite as far as yours does as far as evaluating quarterbacks and things of that nature.
I'm not that much older than you.
I had to throw the caveat in there. So I think he will make some plays because he's a gamer. He's going to be up for this game, just like Notre Dame is going to be up to play in this game as well. So I do think he's going to make some plays. But I think Clark Lee overall will take away what they're good at, and that's throwing the ball. And so I did give them 17. I think Phil's going to make some plays. On the other side of the ball, I am going on the optimistic side, and here's why. We went into the last game with just a checklist of things that we were looking for Notre Dame to take that next step. And at the top of the list was Ian Book, right? It was, can he take that next step? And look, he did not play a perfect game, and we've talked about that in our breakdown podcast. He didn't play the perfect game. He missed some reads, but he played with a confidence level that I personally haven't seen since 2018 when he first took over the job. He was a super confident quarterback at that point. Maybe it was he didn't realize he was the starter at Notre Dame and he wasn't playing with that pressure. I don't know, but he was playing with confidence in 2018. This year, he hasn't found that confidence until the Clemson game. He took those shots to Javon McKinley downfield, the 50-50 ball on the sideline in the first series. I was super excited to see that. I was like, okay, maybe this is a sign of things to come in this game. The shot down the field where McKinley made a great catch, that was awesome. Obviously, the shot down the field to Avery Davis on the final drive. He's taking shots. He's squeezing the ball into windows that he wasn't even attempting to squeeze the ball into. The one to Michael Mayer comes to mind. The play to Tommy Tremble comes to mind when he had a wide open Javon McKinley on the crosser, but he took that play to Tommy Tremble, which was the more difficult play, but he threw it with confidence. It was on the money and still got the first down. He's also not double clutching, with hesitancy, throwing the ball. When he wants to throw the ball, he throws the ball right now. That's key. I think that carries over. I'm hoping that Ian Book has turned the corner as far as his confidence level is concerned. I think, and again, when we talked about this in our last podcast, I'm not looking for a specific stat from Ian Book. I'm looking for, it's the eyeball test. Is he playing with confidence? Is he scrambling when he needs to scramble, when he's supposed to scramble? Or is he bailing early because he's seeing ghosts or whatever the case may be? I'm confident in Ian Book. I think he's going to take that next step, and I think he's taken the offense with him. I think he has infused confidence into the wide receivers with his show of confidence in them. And I think this offense is going to just take off. So I've got Notre Dame scoring 42 points. I've got 42-17. I think this offense is going to have a day. They're going to be wearing their home blues, I would imagine, since Boston College is wearing their white. So, let's turn Chestnut Hill into Notre Dame Stadium, and I think they're going to score a bunch of points.
So 42-17 is your prediction.
Yes, sir.
For me, Vince, I'm not going necessarily with an optimistic view. I'm looking at it from a matchup standpoint. And from a matchup standpoint, the biggest difference between Notre Dame and Clemson is line play. And I think it's often at times we'll look, BC played Clemson tough, and then Notre Dame and BC went to overtime, so this is going to be a competitive game. I don't think that's how football works. I think
not the transitive property, right?
Right. To me, it's more about how do you match up specifically against this particular team? And some teams, Syracuse is an example. Syracuse, for whatever reason, has given Clemson a tough game in 3 of the last 4 times they played. They almost beat him in 2018. They beat him in 2017, and then they held a third-quarter lead against Clemson this year. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about Syracuse where they tend to give Clemson a tougher game than other teams, give them. So I look at matchups, and I think one of the things that has helped BC this year is they're a very physical football team, especially on defense. They're tough. They're well coached. They're gritty. They're kind of, you had mentioned this in our preview podcast. This is a traditional BC defense from a physicality standpoint. It's not a traditional BC defense in that they don't have some of the NFL caliber talent that they've had in the past. Not just under Don Brown, but even when you go back to Coach Spaz and back, even when Tom Coughlin was there, they would have 3 or 4 NFL caliber players on their football team on defense. I don't really see that on this unit. I see a bunch of really tough, gritty kids that are coached well, but lack the kind of talent to go toe-to-toe with a program like Notre Dame for 60 minutes. So I think this is going to be a dominating offensive line performance, similar to what we saw in 2017. I'm not saying they're going to run for 515 yards like they did in 2017, but I do think it's going to be a really physical, imposing game. And I think they're going to try to control the clock and keep the BC offense off the field. And I think that is where the offense can serve a role in stopping Phil Jurkovec as well, is don't let him get into that kind of rhythm. So from a matchup standpoint, I just don't think BC can physically hold up. Whereas when you looked at the Clemson's offensive line, as we saw against Notre Dame, and as we talked about in that podcast, it's not as good as it's been in the past. It's got some talent, but it's not there yet. Notre Dame physically beat them up. BC's not going to be able to do that against Notre Dame. Notre Dame is going to be able to physically, I think, beat up BC. I think on the other side of the ball, when I look at the matchup of the Notre Dame offense or defense against the BC offense, this is a physical offensive line, but one that lacks really any kind of athleticism at most spots. And I think they're going to have a hard time with Notre Dame's front. Notre Dame doesn't have a big, beefy defensive line that looks at, wants to play a slug-it-out game. They're tough. They're physical, but they're quick. They're athletic. They throw waves at you. I had an article on Thursday at irishbreakdown.com where I talk about how Notre Dame played 11 different defensive linemen against Clemson, and 10 of them played at least 10 plays. They're just throwing waves at you, and it's a credit to what Mike Elson has done from a recruiting and a development standpoint. So I just think they're going to overwhelm BC in a way that Clemson couldn't. Clemson has to pressure to get to the quarterback. We saw that against BC. We saw it against Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to be able to just completely overwhelm the run game from Boston College. I think they're going to be able to get pressure up the middle on Phil Jurkovec, and I think that they're going to they're going to give up some big plays. That's just going to happen, but it's not going to be enough to really keep BC in the game, in my opinion. I don't think BC matches up well enough in the skill positions. I think that, that Hunter Long is going to have a little tougher time getting room to work against Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and Shane Simon and Kyle Hamilton and Sean Crawford than he has in recent games. I think at least matchup-wise, that's how it should play out. And I don't think C.J. Lewis and Zay Flowers are good enough, in my opinion, to make the play after play that they're going to need to make to hang with Notre Dame. So I'm going to stay a little close to what I was in my previous podcast as I look through it. I'm going to go 37-17. I just don't see Notre Dame scoring 5 touchdowns and 1 field goal. I think it's going to be more of a 4-touchdown, 3 field goal type of situation because I'm not fully confident that the red zone offense is ready to completely get there. Although I'm a little optimistic based on what we saw in the fourth quarter and then in overtime.
Yes.
That maybe they're going to get Ian Book moving and get him on the pocket, use his athleticism, use his running ability to set up throwing opportunities as opposed to just dropping back and having him go through progressions. Because as you know, Vince, in the red zone, reads happen a lot quicker. Decisions have to get made a lot quicker. Well, Ian Book, again, part of being a good coach is knowing what your guys can do. Ian Book is over 30 starts in, right? He's not a quick decision maker. That's just not who he is. He can be if his first read is open, but if he's got to go to reads 2 and 3, he's just not a real quick decision maker. And his ability to process read to throw is not as immediate as other quarterbacks. So you got to know that.
Sure.
So utilize what he does do really effectively, which is run, which is throw on the run, which is move around, is what we've seen. So I think we'll see some of that, but I still think we're going to have to see them settle for some field goals in a 37-17 game. Now, you talked about the prediction, how you think the game is going to get played out. Now it's game ball time. So when you and I talk, probably around 7:30 on Saturday night after the game is over, who do you predict is going to get the game ball for the Notre Dame offense?
This is tough. This is tough. I said a lot of good things about what I think Ian Book is going to do. So that would be the obvious place to go. But what I neglected to bring up, which you did bring up, is the fact that I just think Notre Dame's offensive line is just going to bludgeon BC's front. And the recipient of that bludgeoning is going to be Kyron Williams. I feel like he's going to have a big game. I think he is going to just inflict punishment on the Boston College defense. The kid looks for contact, and I love that about him, but he can make you miss in space too. So because of what the offensive line is about to do to Boston College, I think Kyron Williams is going to end up with my game ball.
I think Kyron's going to have another big game, but I think Chris Tyree's going to rip off a big run. I think Sebo's going to have some carries, and I think for that reason, I think this game is going to be more about the big boys up front. And my game ball is going to go to who I think the best of that group is. I think Liam Eichenberg, struggled a little bit against Clemson. And the few times over the last 2 years, because he's been one of the nation's best tackles the last 2 years, the few times where he's kind of had a bit of a rough game, he tends to bounce back with a really dominant game because he's got a little bit of an edge to him where he's going to watch him. I don't think I could ever be more critical of Liam Eichenberg's performances than he just strikes me. Him and Robert Hainsey both strike me as the kind of guy where they'd read my post-game write-ups and be like, that guy thought I played better than I actually did. They're just that kind of guy, and that's what you want great players to be. And so I think that you're going to see Liam Eichenberg bounce back with a really dominant performance against BC. I think we're going to see a lot of big runs kind of happen right behind him and Aaron Banks. So I'm going to end up giving my game ball kind of to the line as a whole. But if I have to go to one player, if I can't cheat and give it to, 5 guys, I got to go to one. I'm going to go with Liam Eichenberg. How about defense? Who do you see being the getting the game ball for the Notre Dame defense?
So you and I talked about this scenario towards the end of our preview podcast that you can check out on Soundwise and on the YouTube channel, I believe. But we talked about this scenario that I brought up where in the last game, I thought Kurt Hinish just played out of his mind. I mean, he showed in a compact body for a defensive lineman. I mean, he played like he was 6'5", 350. I mean, he was hit the strength up the middle. I mean, he was helping to, push that line of scrimmage back into the Clemson backfield. He played very, very well. And I expect him to continue at least on that path, maybe not as dominant because it's not easy to do game in and game out. But because of that, I feel like they're going to be able to put Kyle Hamilton in the back to play some center field. And I just, when I think of Phil Dracovic, I think of that beautiful long ball. But then if I'm on Notre Dame, I'm thinking of Kyle Hamilton with his center field glove on, just be like, can of corn, baby, can of corn. Here we go. I just think he's going to make some plays. They're going to test the Notre Dame secondary. There's no question. If I'm Clark Lee, I want to have my best guy in space back there patrolling center field. I think they could play some one high. You can bring Sean Crawford down into the box to do some things that normally Kyle Hamilton does. I think he can do that in the box for sure, especially against a team like Boston College. But if you want to eliminate the big plays, put big number 14 back there. And I think he can not only pick a ball off or two, but he can, dislodge the ball from some guys. He can make big plays in the secondary. I want to see him patrol the outfield basically. So I'm going to I know surprised. He's like the best player on the defense, but I'm going to go Kyle Hamilton.
I think Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah might want to have a word with you on that.
But those two guys are the layups for the game ball, but I'm going to go with Kyle Hamilton.
I'm going to go with two guys on this because I can. Because I think they're going to kind of play together. I think, number one, last year we saw BC was the breakout game for Adi Ogundiji. He had 2.5 sacks. He was just a monster in that game. Made plays. I mean, I remember they ran a jet sweep early in the game, and he chases the guy down from behind for a loss. I mean, he just was a monster. And I think he's kind of been creeping up towards a breakout game the last couple games. I think his performance in overtime, because, he obviously had the big sack, but if you go back and watch the 4th down play, he just, on a 3-man rush, just blew past the right tackle, which kind of forced the quarterback to step in and get rid of the ball a little bit quicker. So I just feel like he's on the verge of a breakout. I think this is a game where we saw him last year kind of break out, and I think he's going to do it again this week. And I think that pass rush that he's going to help provide is going to be a reason why I think Kyle Hamilton's also going to be a big part of it, to your point. And for me, it may not even be just center field picking balls off, but I think the thing that Notre Dame can do that other teams can't do is they have a long, athletic 6'4" player that they can put on Hunter Long. And if you take Hunter Long out of this offense, that's Phil Dracovic's favorite weapon by far.
Yeah, no doubt.
And you have a guy – I remember a play last year where Hunter Long actually beat Kyle Hamilton on a corner route. He was beat by 3 or 4 yards. And by the time the ball got there, he'd closed the gap and broke it up. If you remember that play, it was along the Notre Dame sideline fence. And so I just think that he's the kind of guy that he's a better athlete than Hunter Long. He's long enough to contend with Hunter Long. And I just have a feeling that Clark Lee's going to use him to kind of blanket Hunter Long for a lot of this game. So I think he's going to not just, even if it's maybe not making plays on the ball, maybe he doesn't have 2 picks like you said, but I think he's just going to completely take Hunter Long out of the game, which is then going to maybe set up other players to maybe make some plays on, Dracovic going to a 2nd or 3rd read, going late. Maybe then it results in a sack or him throwing a ball late and somebody else is able to make a pick or knock it down or whatever. So those are my 2 game balls. I think those 2 studs are going to step up and be studs, and that's what's going to be the difference in the game. So, Vince, you have 42-17. I'm going 37-17.
We're in the neighborhood.
Yep. Offensively, Kyron Williams game ball. I'm going Liam Eichenberg. So we're in the same ballpark.
Reasoning
and then, of course, Kyle Hamilton, we both have his defensive game ball, and then I threw Adi Ogundiji in there. You kind of talked a little about Kurt Heinrich. So, I think we see this game in similar fashion. I think it's based on what we've seen on film, looking at the matchup. So that's what we think. Make sure you stay locked into irishbreakdown.com. The Notre Dame BC podcast is not on YouTube. We decided not to put that up. We had some some glitches, let's just say, with the video, so we weren't able to put that up. But you can still find that podcast on Soundwise, and it's also on the front page at irishbreakdown.com. We have our Notre Dame versus BC discussion board. I explained why we need this at irishbreakdown.com. On our website, we're also going to have predictions of the Michigan-Wisconsin game, which is a big national game that we make predictions on, the Miami-Virginia Tech game, which could have implications for Notre Dame should the Irish get upset at some point in time between now and the Clemson game. And so we have a lot of stuff. All of our pregame stuff is up there. So make sure you are checking out irishbreakdown.com. We love the fact that you're subscribing and you're checking out our YouTube channel. We love the fact that you're listening to us in podcast form, but we also want to make sure that you're being a part of our community. We just had a huge site overhaul. Totally different look and feel now. I love how it looks. And the more important thing is it is way better for mobile. It's far more mobile friendly now than it was before. And the commenting feature is a little different now. So I have an update on that on the site. So make sure you check that out. But just stay locked in with us at irishbreakdown.com. Vince, thanks for doing the show with me. We will certainly be back. Plenty more coming up on the website, on the podcast, and on the YouTube channel. So for Vince D'Addario, I'm Brian Driscoll. Have a great weekend and enjoy the game on Saturday.